Apparently, this city is not alone when it comes to dysfunction at the local leadership level. Diane Kalen-Sukra has written a book on toxic culture for civic leaders. Her book is called Save Your City: How Toxic Culture Kills Community and What to Do About It. Diane is a keynote speaker at conferences and summits for city leaders all over the world. Daybreak checked in with her before she heads off to Australia. I started out by asking her why she cares so much about this.
In 2018, I left my job as a city manager or chief administrative officer to sound the alarm on the rise of incivility and toxic behavior in our communities. And at the time, as Canadians, I think we were in denial that this was a widespread problem. But I had worked across the country for over a decade, and this gave me a vantage point to see that political culture was actually deteriorating over time in our communities, and that it was posing a growing threat to good governance, to the effective delivery of services, to the well-being of those serving in local government, and ultimately to our local democracies.
We have had some conflict in Kamloops, a fair amount, between our mayor and city council. Are you telling me this is not unusual?
Unfortunately, increasingly on the rise. And we do have some statistics to show that. This year was a pivotal year, which makes it really clear that it's imperative that we turn this cultural tide, because we saw, for instance, the mayor of Quebec's fourth largest municipality resign her post due to death threats in a hostile political culture. Just this week, the Local Government Association in the UK reported that 20% of local officials have received death threats or threats of violence. In the U.S., we know that 40% of elected officials are considering not running again due to the abuse, and it's not just from citizens, it's sometimes from each other. This is higher for women, for people of color, and underrepresented groups, and so it's causing a lot of chaos. And while we don't have a lot of statistics in Canada, I just organized and held the world's first global civility summit for civic leaders, which was a gathering of 450 leaders from 9 countries to begin to address this global problem together. And while around half of the participants were from U.S. cities, 30% were from Canadian cities. And the statistics coming out of that event show that Canadian civic leaders are experiencing very similar levels of disruption to local governance and service delivery. About 3/4 of our civic leaders are reporting that civility in their communities is challenged, poor, or very poor. Half of us are saying that the frequency of incivility that they're experiencing is frequent or constant. And really most alarmingly is we're seeing around 20% of people in many countries, including Canada, saying that their family members are experiencing harassment as a result of their involvement in politics. And this, of course, is a huge deterrent to people getting involved in politics. And it also, this type of culture doesn't just spread, but it intensifies. So it goes from insults to harassment to threats to violence. And that's the spectrum that we all have a role to stop. And that's my mission. It's what I've been preoccupying myself with for the past few years. I first began by writing a book about it and expressing my actual experiences, one for citizens and one for civic leaders. It's called Save Your City: How Toxic Culture Kills Community and What to Do About It. And then I embarked on a civility speaking tour that has since gone global and continues to this day, because I wanted to express to people that we have agency in this, that culture doesn't just happen to us, that it's a manifestation of the words and behaviors that we consistently tolerate and promote and celebrate, and it's about the way we treat each other every day. And so I take readers on this journey from the hypothetical Bullyville, where I use real examples, many of them Canadian examples, of where we intimidate, abuse, and threaten each other to get our way, to the ideal community, Sustainaville, where we all want to go, a place rooted in respect and dignity for each other. And so I set up Kalen Academy. It's an online civic institute, leadership institute, to support civic leaders and staff, engaged citizens and candidates on this somewhat treacherous political journey, like arming them with the resiliency and the ethics and the civility training, and as well as a network of supportive peers, because it is a difficult journey, and the times we're in do require the kind of civic leadership that can unite and build shared understanding and counter the kind of division and level of misunderstanding and contempt that is starting to plague so much of our local and state and provincial and national politics.
Do you know of a conflict in Kamloops between City Council and the Mayor?
I'm familiar with it. I don't have anything to add besides what is publicly available, and that often is not enough because there are always backstories and deeper causes and whatnot. But we do have that report from the province's municipal advisor, former Mayor Henry Braun. And really, if there was anyone with the moral authority and the wisdom, the character to address that situation, it would be Mr. Braun. But what we're finding in so many of these dysfunctional situations, because Kamloops is not unique, we're finding this in all Western democracies. But wherever we send in, whether it be in Australia sending in municipal monitors or in Canadian provinces sending in advisors, we find that the best in the municipal sector are often sent in and surprised to realize that reason doesn't actually apply. And that indicates that we have a deeper cultural problem. And increasingly, we are seeing people being elected into local office in our Western democracies who may not even respect the institution or who may bring with them a host of conspiracy theories. And there is even what I call the lust for destruction types. We've seen where the goal seems to be chaos. And this is an anathema to civic leadership and to good governance. It is civic leaders who set the tone from the top for the community, and it is the traditional role of these leaders to build shared understanding. And we have a great challenge in our communities right now of a lack of respect between elected officials and citizens, as well as a lack of understanding. And that is tied to a whole bunch of causes, one of them being the incredible decline of civic education and understanding in our community.
What does a city do if an unfit or difficult representative refuses to comply or to step aside? How do you fix this toxic behavior that you're talking about?
It is so frustrating and so difficult. And there's all sorts of voices advocating for some type of mechanism for the removal of people from office. And we can all appreciate why this is a challenge, right? It's not necessarily a simple fix. And my area of focus has not been in legislating civility or enforcing civility, but rather in encouraging the lasting solution, which is in the transformation of civic culture. However, what is important, and from what I can see, is that the council in Kamloops and the city are following the recommendations of the municipal advisor and state laws and using whatever mechanisms are at their disposal. And that sounds wise. And it's not a quick fix, but it's a bit of an educational process for everyone involved. Like elections have consequences. Civility starts with us. We all need to be civil, but we also need to elect civil. And it's only together that we can cultivate civility, which is actually, like, democracy doesn't work without it. And we can see the consequences of the incredible cost that communities pay when they're faced with governance dysfunction.
That is Diane Kalen-Sukra. She speaks to elected officials and city managers at conferences around the world. We reached her on her way off to Australia to speak there. Her book is called Save Your City: How Toxic Culture Kills Community and What to Do About It.